My name's Jess Duemig. I am a survivor. I've 3.5 years out now. I live in South Florida. I was in Miami when I was diagnosed, but have since moved around a bit. Now I'm in Broward County, so loving it there, but was very fortunate to be where I was when I was diagnosed. So I was diagnosed in 2017 with triple negative metaplastic breast cancer. I was 32. It was stage 2A. Super, super crazy because it was absolutely out of the blue for me. No family history, no BRCA genetic mutations, no nothing. And I was sleeping and I rolled over and I felt a sharp pain, thought it was nothing, maybe felt something, but thought maybe it was like a pimple or an ingrown hair or something, but nothing serious because your first thought is not, oh my God, I have cancer.
Right.
And so I let it go. And then about 2 months later, a similar situation happened. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is way bigger. I would say it grew about 300% in just 6 weeks, 2 months, maybe.
Wow.
So it was maybe the size of a pencil eraser, like your pinky fingernail. And then all of a sudden the size of like a really good gumball, like the big ones.
Yes.
And not a gumball as it was, as it turned out. But yeah, I was diagnosed on February 1st, 2017. Had surgery. I had a double mastectomy February 22nd, 2017. 8 rounds of chemo. And then I had reconstruction in August 2017. So quite
Wow.
a whirlwind. I call it 7 months diagnosis to done.
Mm.
But yeah, now I've completed all of my check-ins and everything. And now I am 3.5 years out, was officially cured as of February 28th, 2020.
Congratulations. That is like amazing. I love like diagnosis to done. And that's a whirlwind. We talk about how quickly all of this happens. We don't really have a lot of time to process everything. Also,
Yeah.
it's just, you get into like fighter mode and you're like, what are the decisions I have to make? Schedule, book everything, and move on with life. So that's I love the rapid, like how quickly you just say it too. Like we have these dates also in our mind that
Right.
like we have our birthdays, and then now there's like the day of my diagnosis, the day of my last
Yep.
chemo, the day of the surgery. Like exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. When I was diagnosed, I had 3 weeks essentially to do all the testing, all of the pre-op stuff, and then I was in and out in maybe. Actually, I was in and I had this weird thing happen. So I knew my surgery was supposed to take like 5 hours or 6 hours, and I went in at like 11 o'clock in the morning. And then all of a sudden, it was 11 o'clock at night, the next clock I saw coming out. And I thought, I freaked out. I was coming out of anesthesia. I was freaking out on the gurney or like the hospital bed, I guess, saying to myself, what, not to myself, to everyone, what happened? Did I die on the table? Because you don't know. But I
Right.
knew it was way longer than it was supposed to be, which was very, very off-putting for coming out of major, major surgery. And luckily, they told me there was just some bad planning or whatever, and there wasn't a bed ready or whatever it was, a room. But ultimately, no issues with the surgery. I went straight into fertility preservation, actually, because I was so young, had no kids, was not married. And so I was like, well, I never necessarily wanted kids in the past, but certainly when they take away that safety net of changing your mind, you reconsider.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I got 4 eggs. They're frozen somewhere in Central Florida at this point, but I don't know if I'll use them, but they're there if I decide to. So
Yeah. And so you decided that before you started your chemotherapy?
I decided that before surgery
Before
because
surgery. Okay.
I went in to make my surgical plan and I was in Miami. So lots of different doctors down there, but the one that was affiliated with Baptist Health where I did all my treatments, I basically had to decide within 30 minutes whether or not I was going to do it because I went in to do my surgical planning meeting and at Miami Cancer Institute, they give us nurse navigators and social workers to kind of help us through the nuts and bolts of the process. And when I came out of my meeting with the surgeon, they basically told me, if you want to do this, you have to go right now. Like, get in the car and go there. They're waiting for you. And that was a 25-minute ride. So I had that long to be like, what, what am I doing? And so
Yeah.
that was it. I was on a table in stirrups, seeing if it was viable or able to even be done with whatever. And not what I expected for that day, for sure. It was invasive
Hmm.
to say the least, but Yeah, I decided to do it. Most of the cost of it was covered, which is one thing I don't know that a lot of people know, that the fertility drugs normally would cost almost 30 grand, not covered by insurance. However, there are programs for cancer patients specifically that are subsidized by Walgreens and Livestrong Foundation.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
they actually, yeah, you have to hit some criteria for income. So they
Mhm.
don't want to, if someone has the means, that they're most likely not going to approve it. But luckily I was under the threshold and was able to get all of the medication, the needles, the syringes, everything for $0.
Wow.
I did have to pay a little bit for the procedures, but by that point, half of it was covered, half of it was negligible at that point. The drugs are by far the most important, or the most expensive part of it. So I don't know that a lot of people know that those programs are out there, but I would definitely urge people to check with their um, their cancer centers or wherever they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can do some research and link to that too, and like the show notes of the podcast as well. So our listeners can get some more of that information. I would actually love to take a deeper dive into fertility and like egg harvesting and preservation, because that's actually something that we haven't talked about yet much on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike your decision, I was, well, similarly, but also unlike the outcome, I was also given a very short time to make a decision about whether or not I was going to preserve my eggs. And like literally I was sitting in the doctor's office with my oncologist, and he was like, so you have an aggressive cancer, we want to start chemotherapy like right away. So I had chemotherapy, neoadjuvant chemotherapy, before my surgery to try and shrink the size of the tumor,
Mm-hmm.
um, with the hopes of being eligible for a lumpectomy, which I luckily was because I had a good response to the chemo. But it was
Mm-hmm.
at that moment of like, okay, we need to start chemo like next week. So if you want
Wow.
to have like your eggs frozen, you would need to start that process soon, like today,
Right.
tomorrow. But that would also push back his plan then on doing the starting the chemotherapy regimen. The other
Mm-hmm.
consideration, which you and I are kind of like the opposites, is that while you were triple negative, I was ER positive, and so again, being told to give myself all of these hormone drugs and these shots and everything to try and save the
Yeah.
drug while I knew I had cancer was like, I
Right.
like literally turned to my boyfriend. I'm like, "Are you cool without having kids? Like, there's other ways." And we're like, "Yep, we're cool." Like, it was
Wow.
like a quick decision because you're like, we're dealing with cancer. Like, I don't have time right now to think about the other
Right.
things. Um, so,
Yeah.
I've never actually gone through this experience. I never had to meet with, fertility clinics or anything. I would love to learn a little bit more about what someone who's considering this, what they would expect.
Sure. So, with any cancer, especially breast cancer, I think anyone watching this probably knows by now, it's very closely tied to your reproductive system. I mean, if people don't know, guess what? It is. So the first thing they have to do is make sure that there is no abnormality on your cervix, your ovaries, or anything. Because again, they're not going to pump you full of these drugs if you're ultimately going to have bigger problems. They don't take these kind of risks. And so then what you do is you do hormone treatments for so if normal IVF is a 6-week process, I did mine in 8 days. So,
Wow,
you know,
really?
I left the hospital the 23rd and my first shot was the 24th. And they're self-administered, which is not fun. But so here I am coming off a major surgery on painkillers, not sleeping, uncomfortable, super tired, and hormonal. That is not fun for anyone. Like, I'm already not that pleasant to be around, but you pump me full of hormones, look out. Look out.
Right.
I will say, luckily for my parents, I slept most of the time. So thank God, because I can only imagine
Mhm.
the hell they would have been through with me on hormones. But you pump yourself full of these hormones. You shoot yourself in the hip or the stomach, or like the little fatty part by your belly button. Um,
Mhm.
I'm sure somebody has it like me, but um, and so you do that on a very strict regimen, and they give you all the information, and then once you have to go in period. I think I went in every 2 days, because what the drugs do, and is they hyper stimulate your ovaries. So if you think all your eggs are kept in your ovaries, when they're like about to release, you develop these things called follicles. They look like a little thing, and then it literally spits out an egg into your fallopian tube. So normally during your regular cycle, you'll have one, maybe two, and that's typically how you get twins if they mature at the same rate. But this stimulates up to 10.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They look at them, they see the maturity, and so they're doing an internal ultrasound to see from kind of the inside, and there's only one way to get there, so you can imagine. And so once they are enough of them are mature, you give yourself what's called a trigger shot, and it causes them all to like spaz out and release the eggs. You go in the next morning or that later that afternoon, depending on your schedule. And the doctor goes in with like a microscopic needle and just kind of like sucks them up and puts them in a petri dish and freezes them. Or so I'm told. You're under anesthesia for that.
I was gonna say,
Like
are you
Twilight.
okay?
Yeah. And it's funny because they tell you Twilight and you're like, you're just going to be drowsy. That was very drowsy.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't walk. Like you're in a wheelchair from when they get you off the table, which is very difficult with drains, by the way. It's very difficult to navigate onto this table. It's probably 4 feet off the ground and I'm 5'6". But yeah, it's such a weird experience. But also really, really simple in the grand scheme compared to everything else we're all going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly simple, but definitely difficult, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not hard, but it's difficult.
Well, it's
I
like
don't
you're
have
giving
any
yourself shots. You need to follow a schedule. There's a lot of protocols that you have to plan
exactly.
for. So absolutely. And
Yeah, and
was
sorry.
there pain after like the procedure?
I mean, it's not comfortable by any means, but there's nothing. There's no cutting. There's no stitches. There's no. I would compare it to like an annual exam. A
Sure.
little bit of cramping after that, but nothing we all haven't felt before. And
Right.
honestly, in the face of a double mastectomy, I was already on painkillers, so
Right.
honestly though, I wouldn't say that I needed to take any medicine for the pain. It was there, but it wasn't like
Right.
anything we haven't felt on like a crampy day.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, what a great decision that you had this opportunity to seize and that you were able to go through all of this. And I
Yeah.
wanted to back up to how you started the conversation too. You used the term metaplastic, and that is something that I know when we were emailing back and forth, I was unfamiliar with. So, do you have a moment to share with our listeners also what that refers to?
Of course, yeah. So and I'll just kind of give you a little bit of the background too. Triple negative, I think most people know what that is, but essentially you're negative for estrogen receptor positive cancer, progesterone, and HER2 protein. So that's the triple negative part. That accounts for maybe 5 to 10% of all breast cancers.
Mhm.
Metaplastic is the cell structure of that cancer.
Okay.
So what it is it's a mix of two completely different types of cancer cells all in one. And they compare it to looking like a holly leaf. So it's got like that weird pointed shape. Its structure is just different. And one of the things about metaplastic is that it can attach anywhere.
Mm.
So if it gets into your bloodstream via your blood, basically through the lymph nodes, it can settle anywhere. And it's still considered breast cancer. So at that point, you could have breast cancer in your lung. It's not lung
Right.
cancer; it's breast cancer. You could have it in your big toe if your cells get there, you know. And so that makes it accounts for 1% of all breast cancers. Triple negative metaplastic shrinks it down. There's a lot of controversy on the diagnosis because the adjuvant, where they do chemo first, chemo is targeted at receptor positive cancers, right? So it either works against the estrogen, it works against the progesterone, it does something with the HER2, I don't know what, but it is targeted to that. When you're triple negative, they do it just to kill it because it's basically like acid in your veins. But it doesn't actually do any, like it's not going to shrink your tumor necessarily. So there are some people who still do, I know in Europe a lot, they still do a chemo first to try to shrink it and take what they can get, I guess, and
Right.
then do surgery. But here in the States, my understanding as of 3 years ago when I had mine was that the standard operating procedure literally is mastectomy, usually bilateral. Although that's different doctors say different things.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
But get the cancer out and then treat, like an insurance policy is the chemo. So that's
Right.
what I did, especially at the earlier stages. At the later stages, I don't really know. I didn't research it too much, but I found mine at 2A. So it's the size of a small, like a key lime, a small lime. And so they did a double mastectomy. Then, like I said, the 8 rounds of chemo I did, adriamycin, Cytoxan, and then Taxol.
Oh,
And
I was on
then,
that one too.
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yay.
Wait, the same set?
Yeah, the ACT, and then I was also on Herceptin and Progetta as well. So,
Gotcha.
similar to what you were saying, that some of the practices in Europe or some of the practices here, the more conversations I have with women, like, I'd like to think that there's a standard of care, but it's all so different. And I think when
Yeah.
we think about when they do your original biopsy and they're looking at the characteristics of those tumor cells to come up with your treatment plan, they're it's almost like reading the fine print if you look at the pathology report, right? Like, you could
Yeah.
be 5% like ER positive or 95% ER positive, right? But you still have some traces of some hormonal positive characteristics. Or
Right.
it could be completely 0 or 100%, etc. So I feel like on my situation, I was just gray. Like, I was starting, like, I wanted some answers and everything was like very ambiguous and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And the light bulb went off of, actually, I don't know why I say that idiom. Like, I say the light bulb went off and someone was like, no, it's the light bulb went on. So I don't know which one it actually is.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Never thought about it because I would have said off too.
okay, thank you. So we are
Yeah.
totally on the same wavelength. So the light bulb went off and I was like, wow, so this is why they always say medicine is not a perfect science. And this was
Right.
the first time in my life where, unlike going to just regular checkups, or even if you break a bone, like, they put on a cast and you're going to be fine. This was
Right.
something where it was a very much so like trial and error. And I
Oh, interesting.
don't want to say like it was like an experiment, but it was like, we'll try this, or maybe a higher dose, or maybe a lower dose. And there was all this
Right.
tweaking. And one of the things that I loved about reading the book that you wrote, and I know we're going to dive into that a little bit more throughout the conversation, but what I loved about your book is like, how can we control something when everything is out of our control? And
Right.
that was the very first thing I had to learn to let go of, was like, I thought I had a plan. I would tell my friends and family what my plan was. I would go back next week and my plan would change. And then I'd have to go and tell my family and friends again, like, okay, like, things are changing again. So it was hard to like let go and just let the process happen. And
Yeah.
one of those things, I think the way you say it, like, you're putting your breast in your surgeon's hands, right? Like, we're saying that we are putting, like, trust the process, let the doctors do their thing,
Right.
and we can just cope and manage the best that we can. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's interesting because, what I found, and I talk a lot about this in the book, but for me, I understand that the doctors have to give you every side effect under the moon, right? There's liability, but also they do happen to some people. What I found though was they gave me everything, told me everything, everything, everything. And my thing was that I was in my head about it,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, I'm going to be so sick. Like, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I definitely had some of the side effects. Like, there was no doubt my hands were itchy, and there was no doubt I had massive, massive hot flashes and all that. I went into perimenopause for a year, one full year, which was a nightmare. But I think people have to really let go of some of the control of the external, but the internal right here, you have to be 100% in control of that. You have to feel it and experience it for yourself. Otherwise, you're done before you even start.
Absolutely. I think the mental game is such an important aspect of anyone's health, cancer aside. Just like, your mental attitude can really make or break your day. Like, when you wake up in the morning, I've actually started waking up even before, like, I roll over and like grab my phone and read the news, and I get all depressed and everything. But I'm like in bed, as in like first waking up, and I'm like, say 3 positive things to yourself. Like,
Yeah.
beautiful, I love myself, I'm beautiful, I'm gonna make today amazing, like I deserve this, etc. Because your body is
Right.
going through so much change. And, I think we also talk about, loss and surgery and amputation. It's not augmentation, right? And coming to
Yeah.
terms with our new body, our new figure. And me being on the spectrum, still forced into medical menopause, like my hormones, like, well, that's a whole other podcast topic right there. um just, dealing with like the extra weight gain, or going through like worrying about bone loss because you're in menopause and osteoporosis. Like,
Right.
I literally wake up in the morning, and I love this conversation because you're like, say 3 positive things. Like, it's all about the mindset. I love that.
Hmm. If you have a bruise on an apple that you don't want to eat, you have to cut around that bruise no matter where it is, right? Unless you want to eat it, whatever. But you
Yeah,
don't get to like choose to slice it perfectly after that. Like there is no perfect in our heads. Of course
of
you can
course. Yeah,
adjust your way of thinking. But I sit there and I'm like, you went through too much. Like, leave them alone. Like, they're
yeah,
fine. And it's but our heads go right back there. We're not good enough. This isn't perfect enough. This da 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 da. Like, to be honest, I mean, before I started doing like my diagnosis, and then looking at tattoos and people's scars and whatever on Google eventually, I can't tell you honestly that I saw that many boobs in my life. Like,
oh
you
yeah,
know, I never thought about it. I also didn't see many cancer patients. And it's funny what you say, the weight gain, the menopause, the bones, the everything. Most people in this world, the only cancer they know is what they see on TV.
mm-hmm.
And if anyone listening to this closes their eyes right now, you can see it. Pale, frail, doubled over a toilet, eyes sunk back in the back of your head, teeth kind of look a little funny. That what they do, they make you look really dry, chapped lips from all the puking. Bald, of course,
Of
always,
course, yeah.
with God only knows what headpiece on, which I didn't wear one
Mm-hmm.
at all, scarf or a wig or anything. And that's what people think. And that
Right.
again becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I didn't look sick. Well, okay. Beside from the fact that I was bald and had no hair on my face, eyelashes, eyebrows, I didn't look like that person on TV.
Right.
you know and that's the part where, again, you get back into it. You're like, I gained 40 pounds, right? So tell me again how everyone's frail and puking their brains out. All I could eat, because of, I had really bad not metal mouth, I had really bad dry mouth.
Okay.
And actually had some teeth problems because of it later, where I never had oral problems at all, but because of the dry mouth, it screwed up a lot of my teeth and stuff. But all I was in the mood to eat was cold and sweet.
Mm.
And before chemo, I would drink a lot of soda, and that kept my sweet tooth at bay. I learned, because after I quit soda, it was disgusting during chemo. I started with a sweet tooth. So all I ate was um, frappuccinos from Starbucks, venti, of course,
Yum.
and smoothies.
Yes.
And if you're not making them yourself, which why would you? Because you're already tired, just go pick one up, which maybe is a little snooty, but whatever.
Sure, you deserve it.
Yeah, right. That's all I was eating though. And anytime I was like, oh, I shouldn't eat this ice cream, but you know what? You're going through cancer. You deserve it. Exactly what you just said. You deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And before I knew it, 40 pounds. And it's very difficult to lose, because the other part too is part of perimenopause. It makes it very difficult for women in general to lose weight in their midsection. Well, that's where I gained all my weight.
Me
My
too.
my from basically my collarbone to my hips, front and back. That's where all my weight gained.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to come to terms with. And then you start thinking, then you go right back to it, right? I have to lose the weight, I have to do this, da, 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 da. And then you're like, or I'm healthy, can I just be okay with this?
Yeah,
you know and
absolutely.
and it depends on your whole state of mind and where you're at. Like I said, when I was diagnosed, no kids, no boyfriend, no husband, I was totally single, in the workforce, climbing the corporate ladder. I didn't have time for this.
Right.
And I didn't have time for anything, let alone this, right? So, but now there's that whole other level of, fine, you gained weight, you're not fit like you used to be, but also the scars, also no feeling. So
Right.
the first time you're intimate or whatever, or even just visually, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, well, this is different, and oh, do you like that? And it's like, I don't feel that.
Right.
It's
Right.
very, it's awkward to talk about, but it's
You're
so
like, do I
true.
fake it? Do I tell them? Like, how do you even
Yeah,
do that?
and then you're kind of like, all right, are you done? Like, can you get to something that, it's so weird. It's such a weird thing and again, to talk about. And I find people don't talk about it either. So then it's a whole other level of mental health. And there's just so much below the surface of surgery and chemo. It's
Hmm.
it's so weird. It's so surreal. I even now I forget I had it. Granted, I'm promoting about all that, but on an average day, I'm just like going about it, and I'll knock something off a counter or something, or at a store, and like three things fall on the floor. I'm like, damn it, like,
Right.
because you don't feel it again. You're like, did I do that? Oh man. But and then it's the whole thing. You're like, oh, here we go again. So
Exactly. Well, I
yeah.
think you hit on so many topics right there, right? Like
Yeah,
first,
sorry.
it's no, no,
Just keep
no,
going.
no, it's perfect. That's how my brain works too. So it's like, okay, it's cancer after all the traditional. When you close your eyes and you think of cancer, you're thinking of chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, right? And then no one actually realizes after you go through all of the active treatment, you're either taking time off from work or someone needs to help pick up the kids, etc. You're quote
Right.
unquote back to normal, but we're still going through all of these other changes that
Yeah.
you and I are both a couple of years out from our diagnosis, and we're talking about it as if it were yesterday because these are things that we don't talk about, like sexual health, the mental component, the body changes. Like these are things that are long lasting side effects of our diagnosis, and we're
Yeah.
still getting screened. We still have to get checkups, and so there's this longer term piece that I don't think we are prepared for when you get told you have cancer. Like we know it's life changing, but I don't think, myself included, we realized how life changing it was going to be.
Yeah, you're 100% right, because I mean, I have little ailments now that my doctor will look at me. She's like, "That's totally from your chemo." Like, I have a lot of neuropathy and a numbness in my toes and my fingers.
Yes.
So like these three fingers and the same three toes on both feet go numb, pins and needly, not totally numb, but pins and needles. And my from this started actually when I was on my back recovering from surgery in the bed, sciatica problems that now shoot down
Mm,
the side of my leg. And again, it's one of those things where I feel like an old lady. and
yeah.
and and my doctor my doctor actually said to me, the oncologist did, he's like, you kind of are.
But what I also loved about your story is that, in this conversation, you also said it's not something you think about every day, also.
Mhm.
So, I think that's really important because there was this phase of, man, am I ever going to get to a point where not every ache and pain makes me go into this spiral of, oh my gosh, the cancer spread, or oh my gosh, it's
Right.
cancer again, or maybe I developed something else, which I know we all kind of go through those phases of every little thing is like, oh my God, something's wrong. Um, I
Yep.
remember even thinking it was like allergy season, and I was like, it can't be allergies. Like everyone was like, just take some Sudafed or some Claritin, and I'm like, is it really just
Right.
allergies? Because I really feel like my eyes are watering, my nose is running, I'm coughing all the time. It must be in my
Yeah.
lungs, like something is wrong. But it is true. Like
Right.
we think about it, but it no longer becomes the center or the focus. And the first time that we get annoyed about like an email that comes up, or a kid nagging, or a best friend just like pissing us off over something, like you're like, wow, I'm back to normal again. Like these are normal
Yeah.
agitations that you're like, yeah, come on, bad email. Like, it's just
Right.
nice to be distracted and just know that, like,
Right.
it's not life or death, and you can kind of laugh at some of the frustrations that the day to day gives you.
Because there's also the fear of the unknown. We're not doctors. For me, I have silicone implants, and I feel even now, I feel like when I roll over in bed, I roll and then they come with me. And it's like, you have these foreign bodies in you. But once you get a little more comfortable, I remember one time I was feeling like, okay, let me make sure again, like nothing is back. Because they say you'll know. And I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I know if it is there. So I found something. And I
Mm,
do this because I'm
yeah,
foreshadowing.
sure.
So I go to the doctor or the surgeon. She's checking, and her physician's assistant was in there first. And I'm like, I feel it. It's there. And she's like, oh, I do this right here. And I'm like, yup, that's it. And it was kind of like under and all this. And she goes, okay. And like, kind of like with a not the end of the world
Sure.
look on her face. And I'm like, well, I didn't like that. Like, take me seriously. So then she brings the surgeon back in, and the surgeon is like feeling the same. She's like, right here. And I was like, yeah, that's it. You feel it too. Okay, I'm not crazy. She goes, oh, you're not crazy, but that's your rib. And I was like,
Oh my God. Of
yeah.
course.
Yeah. So, good news is my rib is there. Didn't go
Yes.
anywhere. Bad news is I'm not ever, ever, ever going to be a biologist or anything that uses human anatomy. Why would I
Well,
think that was my rib? Your ribs are not, like, there's no end to your rib. I don't
right, of course. And we get so like anxious over feeling anything. Like I'm the same way.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not always in front of a mirror either when I'm doing like exams. And so I would feel something and then I'll go to the mirror and be like, oh nope, that's exactly where the scar tissue is. Like I'm
Right.
like pinpoint like blindly exactly where the cuts and scars are. And you're like, nope, that's just the scar tissue again.
And at one point my oncologist was like, let me listen to me. You need to live your life. This is not coming back. If it does, trust us, you'll know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a hard part too, because we get in our head, again, it's all in our heads. Like we're like, oh my God, what if I don't feel it in time? You'll feel, you'll know. Like you're already hypersensitive to it, right? The fact that you're asking the question means you're gonna know. But
Exactly.
every time he's live your life. The science is so good, like
Yes.
just trust the science. And
Right. And if it's important to you to travel, if it's important for you to go do things, like just do it. And I think it's
yeah,
wonderful when the doctors recognize that that is a part of you. The doctors no longer are saying, oh, you have cancer, stay home, rest, sit on the couch, woe is me, stop everything you're doing. It's now this
right,
amazing approach of, okay, keep doing as much as you possibly can, be kind to
yeah,
yourself, be gentle to yourself, and stop when like you're exhausted and when you don't want to do things. But
right,
like go outside, take a walk, walk the dog. Like you
yeah.
worked through your treatments also, right? You just took a couple days off when you were going through like the schedule of the chemotherapies.
I think you have to live your life though. I think we fight so hard to survive. But so what's the point of not living?
Right.
Right. I think
Well,
you got to do your own thing, and you'll know when you can't.
I
That's it.
think as women, like one of our other superpowers is just having that intuition, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling a lump, maybe you'll feel something in your stomach, or you'll just mentally like you will have this innate ability to just say, I am not feeling well, I can't pinpoint it, something's not feeling right. And you advocate and you push and you wait until you get an answer and you petition for screenings and any sort of test because at the end of the day, it's our choice. And
Yeah.
we got to use our voice for that. I am dying
Yeah.
to know after this amazing conversation. I feel like if you're not already a motivational speaker, I feel like you should be one because you are so um, direct, but also optimistic and with such great tidbits and advice. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
How did you get motivated to write Warrior, your book?
When I was at Miami Cancer Institute, they kept asking me, do you want a support group? Do you want a support group? Do you want a support group? I was like, no, 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 fine. Like if someone asks you if you're hungry often enough, you'd be like, fine, I'll eat, same
Right.
thing. And so they gave me a couple women to talk to. And one of them was a married mom. She was 32. She was 3 kids in, dog, white picket fence, whatever. And I was like, no, like, I'm sure you're very nice, but there's nothing we're not going to relate. Like, I'm sorry. And then, another one was like a 38, 39-year-old single mom of 1 kid. I'm like, again, this is not like, I am going to work every day. Like this is disrupting my corporate life. Like
Right. Right.
it's
Exactly.
very different. I have to tell strangers about my stuff. Everyone knows, like, we want to talk about, like, even like feminist, whatever out there, everyone knows my boobs are fake. Like
Right.
it's weird, and I wear a certain shirt and it's very obvious, or it's the opposite, or what, it's just so much different. And so finally I was like, you know what, forget it. I don't want a support group. And so I kind of made my own. Come from a big family where word travels fast, but it's always not the right word. So I was like, I'm making a Facebook group. You can join if you want. I don't want to put all of my gory details out there because I had no intention of censoring anything or
Mhm.
keeping my language in check or not giving the facts. And the facts of this are gross a lot of times, or inappropriate for Facebook, depending
Mhm.
who's in your friends list. And so I made this group, and that support group started, and people were like, hey, I know someone, this group is great. Can you let them in? I was like, yeah, sure. If that's going to help them, whatever. I don't care. Enough love to go around. And so then people were like, well, this is really helping me. And it grew and it grew. And someone said, oh, you should write a book. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm going to write a book. Okay. My grandmother actually, at one point, she fell and needed a hip replacement. So she was in
Ooh.
rehab. And for whatever reason, I gave her those pages I wrote, and she read it, and she's like, you have to keep writing this. So, the next 50 pages like took 6-8 months, and then finally I was like, this is stupid, I'm not doing it. She's like, you have to finish this, you have to finish this. So finally I just decided to do it, and at that point I had my head in the game. It was a different perspective on everything. It wasn't until after I was officially cured, so everything was behind me. I wasn't constantly in my head about. But then once I said, you know what, okay, I'm cured, my life is on track, blah 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 blah, I sat down and I wrote it, and at that point it flowed, and I was like, holy crap, okay, maybe this was the right thing. And then yeah, that was it. I just wanted my experience to help me. And what I realized about halfway through, when I really it was starting to crank, I was like, this is what I needed 3.5
Yes,
years ago.
100%.
Because if someone would have taken that book and said, Jess, here, it takes away the fear of the unknown. And I'm not saying it's the best book out there, but I looked when I was designing I had the cover designed. I looked at what else was out there because I was like, all right, well, I don't want to be weird. I have to make sure I don't copy anybody. And they were all pastels, little pink and green, any other book on the market. Really frilly bras, all illustrated, and they were cute. And I was like, there is nothing cute. There is nothing sexy. There is not a frilly bra in the world that will fit you after this.
Right.
There's nothing cute and fluffy about breast cancer. And the book itself is, oh, it's in your face. Black with this bright pink starburst on it. It is called Warrior. It's Warrior with a subtitle of Challenge Accepted, and it is just in your face because it's exactly what's going to happen to your brain when you're diagnosed. It's like an explosion of pink. you
Mm.
know it is battle. If you go into this thinking you're defeated before you are, you will be. I split it into two parts. One is the very physical. Here's what to expect for
Mhm.
you and for your supporters, because you're going to need help and all that. And it talks you through I find, and even as I go into some of the support groups online, the Facebook groups, people just don't know what to expect.
Right.
And you never really understand it until you go through it. But I feel like Warrior kind of talks you through it, and it's not going to tell you exactly how you're going to feel, but it's going to prepare you for what you're going to experience, and then you can feel it differently.
And I feel when I was reading through it, I was laughing. I thought your book was I know it's not a comedy, but I'm kind of laughing because it's relatable, right? There's a lot of cancer books out there and there's a lot of great advice. I think it can be very healing for the author to write. And
Yeah,
even what we do at survivingbreastcancer.org, we have a whole section on survivor stories. And a lot of those stories come years after the diagnosis because
yeah,
I think when you're diagnosed with it, you don't even know how to to journal about it, how to write about it, how to come to your own thoughts. So,
right.
a lot of women I think come to us afterwards saying, wow, we really went through something and now we have a story to tell. So I think that's amazing. One of the pieces that I love in your book that made me chuckle was just your ability to say, all right, we just had the double mastectomy, and we're home, we got the drains, and how do you get into the bed? Right? Do you flop
Yeah,
onto it? Is it more of a roll technique? And
right.
one thing that I love too that I'll share with our listeners, I didn't realize no matter how or whatever great shape you're in and how strong your core is, when they after surgery, those core muscles, oh my God, trying to
Yep.
lie down, trying to get up. It was I don't even have the adjective to describe how like waking up to have to go to the bathroom to roll myself off of the bed and move was like
Right.
muscle I have never used before. And
Yeah.
to not realize how much of your chest you use in every single day. I
Every day.
I burst into tears because the suction of the refrigerator was so tight that I could not open the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you used your upper extremities so much that now I'm just like, part of my morning affirmation. Thank you, body, for letting me like raise my hands above my head and like reach for the coffee
Yeah.
cup on the top shelf. Like, can you imagine? Like, no coffee, can't reach the top shelf, can't get the cream in the milk. Like, it was a disaster.
Yeah, and I tried to write it as actually I like to keep humor in it because I feel like if we don't laugh, we'll cry. You
Yes.
know, and some of it's just so ridiculous that you're just like the drains. I got to tell you, I think the drains are the worst part of cancer. And I know that that sounds so trivial in the grand scheme, but honestly, that freaking drain, I had 3 drains in each side after my mastectomy for 4 weeks, and then 2 of them in each side for another 2. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me with this. Like, they're in your way for everything. If you do one wrong thing, they feel like they're ripping out of you. And then what's the funny part, and this is why I think it's funny, is like you think this little thing is just like in there just like a little bit, and then you see them pull it out and the thing's this long. That wasn't going anywhere.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
And it's such a like a vomit inducing feeling when you pull on it a little, even when you're like, you know, when you have to squeeze them.
And I just remember like pulling and doing like the milking of the drains and getting the blood to go through to squeeze it out. And I was like, Laura, it doesn't hurt. Nothing hurts. It's all in your head again, right? Like you mentally think it's gonna hurt, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
wait, no, I can do this. Like actually, and then by like 4 weeks in, I'm like, I'm a pro. I got this, no problem.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like the mental side of and the visual side and the physical side, I think hurts a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the second part of the book too is the emotional side. Like, okay, so you did it. Cancer's there, done, kind of ish.
Mm-hmm.
Now what's going on in your head? You know, it's and that kind of transitions into, you know, I put down my feelings because I find, and again, a lot of the inspiration of this came from some of the questions women ask in these Facebook groups to other women. I'm like, some of it should totally be directed to your doctor. Stop asking us this. You should only be asking your doctor this. Like, nothing anyone tells you should be in your head. But the other part is, you know, like, just, is this normal? Is this normal? This is something that keeps popping into my head. You know, I keep thinking about death. I keep thinking about this. And it's like, look, it doesn't matter what you're thinking. Yes, it's normal.
Well, and that's exactly what you wrote about. We just had, just this past week, we did a webinar on preparing like estate planning. And it's something I never thought I would have to like, is this a thing? Do people want this? It sounds kind of morbid, but like we need to confront
Yeah.
these tough questions. And you're like, absolutely. Like we need to know about our will. What is a living will? Who are our beneficiaries?
Right.
Like who, like, I don't, and so you write about that in your book as well. Like some of these questions that people have to confront. And then we
Yeah.
did a webinar on it. And I literally was like, this weekend, I'm like, okay, I got to get my stuff in order. Like, this is like, I don't know where anything is. I'm in my 30s
Yeah.
too. And I'm just like, God, I feel like a kid and I don't know how to like be an adult. And now I have to worry about like estate planning.
Yeah. It's weird.
But
And
yeah,
what's really scary is when you do put this all on paper, your entire life is right there in the palm of your hand, literally on paper or in an Excel file, and you're just like, holy crap, that's either that's it, or oh boy, like,
right.
okay, this is way different than I ever expected it to be. And one thing that I just found out is that, so with COVID-19, it has long-term heart effects, or can. So if you're already having a weakened heart from chemo, that is a much more important thing to know.
There's a study that we're actively involved in actually with one of the hospitals in Boston, but it's a national study where we where we surveyed those diagnosed with breast cancer during the time of COVID, because
Mm,
we are at this phase now too where we can capture a very distinct population and follow them
yeah.
over time to see, was your treatment delayed? How has, not people who've been diagnosed with COVID, God forbid, but who are being diagnosed with breast cancer during the time of COVID, and how COVID
Right.
has potentially impacted their outcomes. And so we won't know that
Yeah.
until some time passes. But we hear stories all the time, right? Like surgeries are delayed, chemo treatments are delayed. And then even for us who are kind of a couple years out, you know, are our mammograms, if you are still getting mammograms, are those being delayed? And just regular prevention care, I think, is a little scary. Um,
I was talking to some of the people at Miami Cancer Institute, and they told me that mammogram breast cancer screenings are down 70% during COVID year over year. And what's scary about that is we know the diagnosis rate of the number of people who have a mammogram and ultimately get
yeah,
diagnosed. Um, the problem is, right, in 6 months or a year, that is now stage 3, stage 4, and
exactly.
now it's late stage and very difficult to treat. I know it gets very scary very quickly because your lymph nodes essentially filter your blood, but they are infected, so they're putting cancer cells through, kind
Everywhere.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's no excuse now. If you're not gonna go get your scheduled mammogram, at least do your self checks. Do them do them whenever, wherever you can.
I know. I think it's just
Like,
going back to your
yeah.
feminist comment, just like one more uphill battle we have to like, ask for. Like we
Ugh,
shouldn't be the
right.
victims. Oh, wonderful. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking a deep dive in everything from like where we start off, like egg preservation and surgery, and ending up with this like amazing book. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
This was a great way to spend the afternoon.